There are some strange things you don't know about the NBA, from the rarest jersey in NBA history to an actual chair getting drafted.
With the first pick in the NBA draft.
And I bet you didn't know that the NBA you know today was almost completely different, because we almost had some of the worst team names I have ever heard. Like how the Phoenix Suns were almost the Cactus Giants, or like how the Milwaukee Bucks were almost the Milwaukee Skunks. And it gets a lot worse than that. The Heat were almost the Barracudas, the Grizzlies were almost called the Mounties, and the New Jersey Nets were only one vote away from being the New Jersey Swamp Dragons. I kinda like the Swamp Dragons more than the Nets. I mean, look how cool their uniforms are. But by far the weirdest team name was in 1946, because the owner of the Boston Celtics couldn't decide on a name, and one of the team names he almost chose was the Boston Unicorn. Could you imagine Jason Tatum on the Boston Unicorns? That's just not right. But something else that isn't right is that NBA players are lying about their names. We got Wardell Curry, Walter Allen, and Edris Adebayo. I mean, even the shortest player in NBA history isn't even named Muggsy. His real name is Tyrone. But for number 3, I bet you didn't know that Anthony Davis tried to kill Steph Curry. It seemed like Anthony Davis and Steph Curry were friends. Even after the Lakers beat them in the playoffs, they still hugged it out. But it turns out, they actually hate each other, and it got so bad that Anthony Davis had to end it once and for all.
You wanna shoot him?
Yep.
Send out this one into the PD, man.
We out.
Man, all just because Steph has 4 rings and AD only has 1. But speaking of Steph Curry, at number 4, we already know he's the greatest shooter of all time. But you definitely didn't know that he could go pro in another sport. Now we're used to him hitting half-court shots, but this dude is actually hitting hole-in-ones too.
And it's obvious he can really play.
Boy, this is right at it if it gets there. How about that?
It all started back in high school, where he played on the golf team, and because he was only slightly better at basketball, he had to put his golf game to the side. But almost every year, he plays in the celebrity golf tournament in Lake Tahoe, and this year, he actually won it all with the help of his hole-in-one. And a lot of pro golfers are saying he has a chance to go pro once his basketball career is over. But for number 5, I bet you didn't know that women could actually play in the NBA. In 1969, the San Francisco Warriors selected Denise Long in the 13th round of the NBA draft. She was only 5'11", but this chick was insanely good at basketball. After scoring 93 points in one game, the next team decided to double team her, and it worked. They held her to only 64 points, and still lost. Unfortunately, Long was vetoed from ever playing in the NBA, because at the time, they didn't allow anyone to enter the draft right out of high school. But she wasn't the only girl who almost played in the NBA. Brittany Griner was one of the most dominant women's players ever, setting the college record in both men's and women's basketball with the most blocks ever, with 748. She was also one of the first women to start throwing it down. She was so good in college that the owner of the Dallas Mavericks thought about drafting her. If she's the best on the board, I will take her. And Griner thinks she would dominate the NBA, even saying she would beat DeMarcus Cousins one-on-one.
I'm glad she's that confident in her abilities, but she's also a little delusional.
But these aren't the only women in the NBA, because I bet you didn't know that Caitlyn Jenner was once drafted into the NBA. Before she was Caitlyn, Bruce Jenner was the 139th pick in the 1977 NBA draft. He was known as the world's greatest athlete, setting world records and winning the 1976 Olympics. When he was drafted by the Kings, they gave him number 8,618, which was his decathlon score. He signed everyone's autograph, but never actually played one game in the NBA. The reason he was drafted to begin with was because NBA owners hated the old 10-round draft. Nowadays, there's only 2 rounds, but back in the day, the draft would last hours, and teams were running out of players to draft, so they decided to draft anything and everything in 1977. The Kings drafted Bruce Jenner, the Jazz took a girl named Lucia Harris, who was pregnant, and the Celtics took a water boy. But those weren't even the weirdest picks, because not only did the Lakers draft Scooby-Doo, they also drafted a chair. Imagine declaring for the NBA draft, and you have to tell your parents, Scooby-Doo in a chair were drafted before you. The NBA wanted nothing to do with Scooby-Doo or a chair in the NBA, so they rejected the picks. It's a shame because they could have gotten away with it too.
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Speaking of weird things getting drafted by the NBA, what if I told you that you could be drafted too? This is Jordan Haber, and he's a regular guy just like you and me. He didn't even play basketball in middle school or high school, but somehow he found a loophole that made him eligible for the 2023 NBA draft.
So I made a bet with my friends, and I made it into the NBA draft.
If you don't believe me, that's like the official NBA email down there. That's my email. This is some of the like official paperwork I had to fill out that the NBA sent me.
You see, all you need to be eligible for the NBA draft is be at least 19 years old and wait 1 full year after graduating high school. And Jordan here had all the requirements, so he sent all the paperwork to be eligible for the draft. And after waiting for a few weeks, he finally got the news.
Jordan, your name was contained on a list sent to NBA teams. You are eligible for the 2023 NBA draft.
Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely need to start practicing so I can go to the draft next year. But for number 8, there's no way that you knew that this jersey was the rarest in NBA history. After Hurricane Katrina, the New Orleans Hornets were forced to relocate to Oklahoma City for 2 years. So to show their appreciation, on Valentine's Day they wore bright red jerseys to thank the city for letting them play there for 2 years. This was the one and only time these jerseys were ever worn in game, and right after they were sold to auction to help raise money for charity. Combining all sales, they raised $22,000. And this was the last time anyone ever saw the rarest jersey in NBA history. But soon, there'll be no such thing as a rare jersey, because in 2019, Adam Silver unveiled the NBA's first smart jersey, and with the press of a button, it can change to anyone's name or number. In 1 second, he changed Steph Curry's jersey into Michael Jordan's. These won't be available until 2030, so you still have some time. Now for number 10, we have to switch to the WNBA, because I bet you didn't know that the highest salary is only $234,000. And the average WNBA player only makes about $100,000 per year. Now comparing that to the highest paid player in the NBA, Steph will make $51.9 million next year. That means if he played in all 82 games, he would make almost $633,000 per game. That's $5,924 every hour in the entire year. However, everybody knows NBA players make way more than WNBA players, but there's no way that you knew that NBA mascots make their salary look embarrassing. Rocky makes $650K with the Nuggets, Harry the Hawk is at $600K, and Benny the Bull is up to $400K per year. I mean, even Go the Gorilla makes $200K every year. But even NBA referees are making more. Depending on how many years you've been doing it, refs make between $180,000 and $550,000 per year. I guess everyone's making more than the WNBA. But the real question is, how did we go from this to this? In 1881, the first game of basketball was played using a soccer ball. 13 years later, Spalding were the ones who made the first ever basketball. They had already worked on footballs and baseball gloves. It was the leather ball held together by laces, and to make it a little different than a soccer ball, they made it slightly heavier and 4 inches bigger. In 1948, the first ball was molded and looked a lot more like the basketballs we use today. By 1970, the ball kept improving and became the official ball of the NBA. Instead of using leather, they decided to switch to synthetics, and the ball remained relatively the same till 2006, when the NBA's new ball was hated by everyone. It feels like one of those cheap balls you buy from the store. The ball just tears my fingers apart. It made my hands bleed. These new balls were made out of microfibers, and it was actually cutting players' hands and making them bleed. This basketball didn't last long, going back to the ball they had the year before, and it took all the way until 2021 for any more change to happen to the NBA ball. This was the year the NBA switched from Spalding to Wilson. The ball was basically the same, but Wilson had plans to change basketballs forever.
A basketball made of powder and lasers that plays like the basketballs we've always known. That bounces without air.
This is the new 3D printed airless ball. With this, you'll never have to worry about a flat ball ruining your day. They feel, bounce, and play just like a regular ball. Now, you may think these will never make their way into the NBA, but we've already seen them used in the 2023 dunk contest. An airless basketball is one of the strangest things I've ever heard of. But at number 13, I know you've never heard of the NBA player who was too young to sign his own contract. In 1996, Kobe Bryant was a top NBA prospect, coming right out of high school at Lower Marion High. At just 17 years old, he was drafted by the Hornets at pick 13, but then traded to the Lakers in one of the worst trades in NBA history. One of the greatest players of all time was sent to the Lakers, and in exchange, the Hornets got Vlade Divac. For his very first contract, the Lakers offered Kobe a $3.5 million deal. The only problem, he was only 17 years old. He was drafted on June 26th, but his birthday wasn't until August 23rd, so because he wasn't legally 18 and an adult, his parents had to co-sign his contract. Yeah, Kobe wasn't even old enough to sign his own contract. But at least Kobe had one of the most popular jersey numbers in NBA history. You can find a 24 Lakers jersey anywhere in the world. However, you can't say the same thing about certain players in the NBA, because at number 14, we got some players wearing some weird numbers, like 67, 81, and 99. Now, as weird as those numbers are, at least they've been worn before. There's only 10 numbers we've never seen worn in the NBA, like 58, 64, 74, and of course, 69. Dennis Rodman was the closest player to ever wear the famous number. He was unique with his hair and some of the outfits he would pull off. But when he joined the Mavericks in 1999, his one and only request was the jersey number 69. David Stern in the NBA quickly denied his only request, so he had to stick with the number 70. And if you're watching this video and ever make the NBA, here are the other jersey numbers that have never been worn, if you want to make history. But another team who just made history was the Sacramento Kings. They broke the record for missing the most playoffs in a row with 16 years. Luckily, they broke their streak last year, finally making the playoffs. However, I bet you didn't know that the Seattle Supersonics have won a playoff series more recently than the Kings. Yeah, even though the Kings finally made it this year, they still haven't won a series since 2004. The embarrassing part about that is the Seattle Supersonics won one in 2005. So even though the Supersonics became the Thunder in 2008, they've still won a playoff series more recently than the Kings. But what's even more embarrassing is number 15, because the Dallas Mavericks decided to unveil the weirdest statue I've ever seen. Dirk Nowitzki is the best player to ever put on a Mavs jersey. He was on the team for 21 years and ended 6th on the all-time scoring list with 31,560 career points, plus won them their only championship. So to celebrate his career, they unveiled this statue. Yeah, this statue is what they were trying to give their best player, and this guy said it best. What's going on with the balls on Dirk's statue? Luckily, the Mavericks got the message, and when they built the final statue, they only included one ball. Now, Dirk may have gotten a statue, but what LeBron James got is way better. Tacos.
Taco Tuesday!
And he loves them so much that he filed for the Taco Tuesday trademark, so every time he said it, he would get that money. My man was trying to make a bag off of tacos. Unfortunately, he was denied, so he'll just have to say Taco Tuesday for free now.
How can someone own Taco?
Come on, man. Everyone should be able to say and celebrate Taco.
Taco.
What are we doing?
Now, this was weird things you didn't know about the NBA. If you want to see the most hated players in NBA history, check it out right here.